above the singing, God, above the music, above the songs. Let your name be lifted high, Jesus. Let your name be honored, God. And we commit all that we are to you, God, everything that we do. And we reach towards you, Jesus. Amen. Here
Check one, two. Hey guys, how you doing? How is everyone? This fine Thursday evening. Before we get started, I just kind of like want to get you guys' thoughts here because uh, we got and um, me and Tiffany, and then Sean and Rylan. Do you guys want to do a full session here, or do you guys want to try again next week? So give me your thoughts in chat, and I'm gonna hold off before I get into the goods of this presentation. Let me know what you guys think. And if you guys got the email, you saw that this session is going to be about the fine tuning of the universe, which I think a lot of us already know about these things, but I think we can sort of dig into them more. Play some background music while you guys are answering. All right, so Tiffany is interested, but Tiffany is like a um, an unfair vote because I could just talk to her on my own. But it looks like so far we're kind of outvoted. Either this week or next week, up to how you feel, Ben. All right, cool. Well, let's dig into this week. Although I am okay, let's dig into it because I think it's some cool stuff. What we're going over today. We'll see if it'll take the full hour or not. I don't know, but let's go ahead and get started. As you guys know already, the disclaimer that I have no official qualifications with this. I am self-taught. My sources do have qualifications, and I do not speak for or represent my sources. The purpose of this Connect group is just simply to have sound reason for what we believe. Actually, this is a good thing to reiterate because this is in a lot of ways this may or may not convince people to want to follow Christ or believe in God. Maybe I think this is just more for ourselves to have to be able to defend for ourselves. I think that's good. Um, okay, Rylan, you can do that if you want. Either way. The other part of this purpose is to explore and inform. Hopefully, we can all learn something from this. All right, last session, which was 2 weeks ago, here's what we covered. We covered evidence that shows the universe is not eternal. Now, notice I didn't say proves, I just said shows, because we don't have evidence to prove it's not eternal, but every evidence that we have found has suggested it is not eternal. So if the evidence if the universe is eternal, we do not have evidence yet to show that. We also covered theories for an eternal universe, which is all philosophy really. It's just because we don't have the evidence. And last time the argument that we covered was a cosmological argument stating that whatever begins has a cause. All right, moving on. We haven't used too many scriptures in in uh, in these sessions, but I thought it would be good. This is a scripture in this chapter, and I thought it'd be good to mention it because this chapter is all about the fine tuning of the universe. So in Romans 1:20 it says, "For since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature have been clearly seen." And then it goes on to say at the end of that verse, "So that people are without excuse." And this is a really interesting scripture to me because I feel it's applicable. It's not just a 3,000-year-old book. Why would anybody listen to that now? I think it's applicable. There are many things that we can't explain, and I know science has explained a lot that we thought could never be explained, but I also feel like the more we discover, the more questions there are. And and there are many things which even again we're going to cover a lot of this today, but there are many things that just point to a creator so that people are without excuse. All right, let's talk about Plato. You guys know who Plato is, the Greek philosopher. And I just learned a little bit more about him today. And I've heard his name a lot thrown around, and I know who he is and all that. And and but I guess he's like called the father of wisdom. That's one of the phrases that people use for him. He is, correct me if I'm wrong, if you guys have heard otherwise. You tweeted, Rylan, thanks for that. And it's okay if we don't get more viewers. It's okay. I don't want you guys to feel like this is not going to be a good session if we don't have a lot of if we don't get more people in here. It's okay. So Plato is kind of the father of wisdom. People have called him that. He sort of, in fact, let me read an excerpt from the chapter because he is such an influential figure to much of the Western culture and societies that we have today. Oops, there we go. He was born in 380, around 387 BC, or not born, but um, he was alive during that time, and I guess he built a school at the time. And the school lasted for 900 years. Imagine that, a school lasting 3 times as long as the United States. It says his goal was to search for truth by means of rational inquiry, and many people went through school that were very renowned. One of them was, imagine this, was Aristotle. Aristotle actually went to Plato's school, and that was part of what was his education. So the thing about Plato is, and much of many of the Greek philosophers was they were baffled with the order of the cosmos and just how it is all functioning seamlessly, right? So that Plato was baffled, and so were many of the philosophers. Plato also believed that astronomy would awaken man to his divine destiny. So he was very, astronomy was, according to what I've been reading, was not just, hey, isn't this cool? It was really it was really about discovering who we are as people, and we learned that from understanding astronomy and the stars and the order of the universe. he also said that people would believe in God for two reasons: arguments for the soul, and I would imagine this includes like consciousness, the fact that we are conscious, we are self-aware, and I don't know of anything else in the universe that is self-aware except for us. So arguments for the soul would convince somebody that God is real, and then the motion of the stars would convince somebody that God is real. So this is Plato's, I guess, belief. So with all this, it kind of had me ask the question: was Plato a theist? Because it sure sounds like he was open to the idea of God. And this is an interesting question to ask because, again, Plato is, quote, the father of wisdom. Any scientists from the last 2 millennia look back to Plato, and he is a source of inspiration. But was he a theist? Because imagine that many of the scientists today are atheists. So the fact that their foundational inspiration in Plato, if he was theist, that's a really interesting thing to think about. I don't know if he was, but my guess is he was at least open to the idea of God. So on that note, I kind of want to point out uh, the talk a little more about the contrast that I find a little bit baffling myself in scientists and atheists today. And it's almost synonymous. It's like many, it's like, hey, I'm a scientist or I believe in science. You automatically sort of have the idea that, okay, well, you're atheist. Or I'm an atheist. Okay, then you probably believe in science because that's the only reason. It's like they're really intertwined. But the truth is, it's not really the case. They oftentimes overlap in today's day. But two things about that is one is they don't always overlap. They just happen to be overlapping a lot right now. And then secondly is many of the scientists, again, the inspirational scientists and foundational scientists throughout history have been theists, which has been a very, again, interesting to think about because uh, of how against theism science tends to be today. So here are a list of different people that were actually theists whom science gets much of their inspiration from. So Galileo, which as you guys know, he discovered that the Earth revolves around the sun, which was against the the belief during that day. In fact, many people believed that it was it was heresy. It was against the Bible to say that the Earth revolves around the sun, but we know that it does. But he was a theist, very much so. In fact, he was very afraid of getting excommunicated from the church, and so, if I'm not mistaken, he didn't want to release his discoveries because he was that's how much he believed. Francis Bacon. Do you guys know who Francis Bacon is? Have you heard of this name? If you have, then I'm gonna guess that you've been to science class in college or something. Tell me if you've heard of Francis Bacon, or is it like Bacon or something? How do you pronounce that? Sounds familiar, Tiffany? Francis Bacon. So he was actually the the I guess founder, if you would call it that, of the scientific method. He was the very first person, according to the research that I've done. This is actually not part of the book. These people. This is just me sort of detouring a little bit outside the book and then getting back into it. So from the research that I've done, Francis Bacon was the he originated the scientific method. The fact that the idea of gathering information and documenting and testing, he was the first person to I don't know, make that systematic and official. So imagine that. The person who discovered or founded the scientific method was actually a theist, and not just a hey, I believe that there's a God out there, but very devout theist. Another one, This one I expect to raise some eyebrows. I hope that you guys have an objection to this because I did not know this. Okay. But Darwin, Darwin, according to the research that I've done, did he have a wife named Frances Eggs? Eggs and bacon. So Darwin, according to my research, he would he was not a Christian necessarily, but he actually was a theist, or he believed that God was the answer to the ultimate answer to everything. I mean, these are not just sort of throwaway names, okay? This is not like, oh, a second tier scientist that inspired, a handful of people. No, these are how many scientists and atheists today cling to Darwin and his theory of evolution, right? But he actually believed that there was a a uh, a conscious higher power according to the research. And if I'm wrong, then please correct me because that would be a pretty big deal if I'm wrong. Einstein, and I actually have a question mark here. By the way, are any of these surprising you guys? The Because it was surprising to me. Einstein, who his theory of relativity, among many other famous things that he did. Um, I have a question mark here because some of the research I've done suggest it's kind of a mixed batch. Some say yes, he did believe in a higher power and God. Others say no way, he never did, and he actually stated that if people thought he did, then they misquoted him. I don't know, but so there's a question mark here. But at the very least, I will be confident to say he was not opposed to the idea of God. Again, as many scientists are today, or at least I think they are today. But he was not opposed to it, and whether or not he actually believed there was, I'm not sure. And maybe you guys can find something research on that. Sean, you said a lot of scientists of today say Darwin would have refuted his own theory of natural selection based on the knowledge we have today. I've heard that as well, because there's so many holes in evolution, in in evolution, and I gotta say, on this note, and this is not part of a big part of what we want to talk about today, but I find it a little bit frustrating when, say, I'm watching a documentary that's very intriguing and very um, I get a lot of knowledge out of it, maybe in National Geographic or PBS or something, and they'll talk about evolution or they'll talk about certain science that it's just fact, and it kind of puts me off because I'm like, I would not have a problem if you say, according to the theory of evolution, we came from, our ancestors looked like this and showed, you know, chimps or something like that. But they don't. They say 30, whatever, millions of years ago, this is what you look like. And they don't give the footnote of saying, according to the theory of evolution. And I'm like, I, that's interesting because I don't think it's fact. I think it's still theory. So uh, yeah, I think yeah, there's probably from what I hear, there's a lot of holes, and I've heard that too. That if he was alive today, he would have refuted a lot of his own his his own theories. But we'll never know. We'll never know. Another one, Isaac Newton, Sir Isaac Newton. He was another one who was not just a theist, but a very devout theist, a very devout Christian, I believe, a church-going person. In fact, I read somewhere that he actually devoted a lot of his time and energy to helping the church. Indoctrination of the theory as a fact. Yeah, I don't like that. I don't like that. I'm really big on like I don't really care or I do care what you believe, but it doesn't bother me what you believe until you state it as fact when it's not really fact. That's when it really bugs me. Allow people to hear the theory and hear the evidence and then judge for themselves. Don't come at them as though it's fact and they're stupid not to believe it. Okay, moving on. So these are all very famous, very inspirational scientists in the past who were theists. But the big question is like, would all of these be theists today? And I'm going to get to that in a little bit. But I have a quote here, and one of these five that I just mentioned here said this quote, and I want you guys to tell me who you think said it. So this person said, "Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind. Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind." Who do you guys think said this of these five? Sean, you said Newton. Is that final answer? Is that what everybody thinks? Tiffany, Plato. Well, I meant of the five here, but that's a good guess. Science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind. Francis Bacon. Eggs. Well, believe it or not, the person who said this, rather than you asked if it was Newton, the person who said this was actually Einstein. So, according to the research that I found, it was actually Einstein that said science without religion is lame, religion without science is blind. And I wanted to put this in here because this sort of summed up a lot of how I feel about what we're learning because throughout our sessions, I've really tried to connect that science is not the enemy to theism, and theism is not the enemy to science. And they really work together. And this second part here, religion without science is blind, which is a bit provocative, but that is a lot of what I've been trying to say for the last 5 sessions now. We really need we really need evidence and science to back a belief. Well said. Yes, I think so. All right, evolution of science and theism. We're not talking about the theory of evolution here, just the evolution of science and theism. Because we just went through a number of inspirational historical scientists that were theists. But again, today, it seems like that's very unpopular. So was it over time that scientists became more so atheists than theists? That's a great question, and I don't know the answer to that. And I kind of hope that we can maybe discuss that because that's part of what this very slide is about. Because I asked myself, when was the switch? When did it happen? So according to this is a recent study, and I don't know where this was, that just over 50% of scientists believe in a higher power. We're not talking about a specific religion here. We're just saying they believe there's a higher power. And I saw a something, and I think this number is dwindling very quickly. So if this is even a few years old, then that number is probably well below 50%. But I saw, you guys know Neil deGrasse Tyson. Let me get a picture of him. Once I show him, you're going to be like, oh yeah, I know that guy. So here's the guy. This is Neil deGrasse Tyson. Very charismatic, beloved. A lot of people like him and doing a lot of great work. But I was watching a video that actually talked about the big guy in the show. Yes, yeah, it's actually true. He is that big guy in the show. So he actually, and I would assume he's very well respected in the science community. I think he should be. And I was watching a video of him saying that the number of scientists that actually pray, that actually believe in in a personal God, so not just a higher power, but actually a God that is personal. That's not just somewhere out there and we happen to be a byproduct, but a God that purposefully made us, and therefore we pray to this God. The number of scientists was actually 7%. 7%. So uh, there are, and these are of scientists in the science community who are like, I don't know what the qualifications are, but you're like a registered scientist. You went to the school for this, and you're considered very intellectual. And that number is 7% of those who are scientists who actually pray to the higher power. But again, I think this number is dwindling. What's the next statement on the slide? We know that famous scientists believe in God. We just covered that. And this is my own, I guess, opinion here. Atheism is increasing rapidly in science. And if anybody wants to object this, please feel free to do so. But I kind of feel like this is just sort of understood. And the question here is, and back to Tiffany's question, like when did the switch happen? Is is because of so many scientists nowadays not believing in God, is it really due to a new age of truth? Have we discovered so many things that it's like, you actually, if you want to be a legitimate scientist, you shouldn't believe in God because there's so much evidence out there, and we have new evidence, new truths, new discoveries that you can't really believe in God because of these things. And as such, we can sort of ask the philosophical question: if Galileo or Plato or if any of those were alive today, would they believe in God? And and many could argue probably that they would not because of these new discoveries. And back in those days, thousands of years ago or even hundreds of years ago, they didn't have the information that we have today. And if they had that information, then they wouldn't believe in God and they wouldn't have thought those things. Sean, you said higher power is like a higher order intelligence, so it includes believing in a species in the universe of a higher order of intelligence, etc. Yeah, almost like believing in aliens, like they planted us here or something. So, okay, so is this a new age of truth? Because we have so much more information today versus even just a few decades ago or 100 years ago, centuries, or millennia ago, because we have so much new information as opposed to those who are alive during those days, could we assume that they would not be theists if they were alive today? And for me, I feel like that's a how should I say it? That's an injustice to who these people were. Okay, these people were extremely intelligent people, and I have to believe that they had their own challenges about theism in those days as we have today. And so I kind of want to talk about how IQ fits in all this. Do you guys know? So we all know kind of what IQ is. It's like, oh, what's your IQ, and so you're really smart or not. Do you guys know what IQ actually stands for? What is IQ? What does that mean? Do you guys know what that means? And I feel like I do want to touch on this. Again, we haven't even gotten into the book yet, but I want to touch on this because essentially I want to suggest that the IQ is a missing link in the assumption that the great scientists of the past would be atheists today. Intellectual quantification, intelligence quiz, says Rylan. It's not a bad guess. It's kind of almost that. Well, actually, IQ stands for intelligence quotient. Intelligence quotient. So intelligence quotient, I actually kind of want to do get us past some of the miss, I guess, misinterpretations of what IQ is. So, just so we're on the same page, IQ simply represents a person's reasoning ability. All right, a person's reasoning ability. And one of the biggest misconceptions about IQ, which I have this happen all the time. Oh, Sean, you got it? Intelligence quotient. Did you look it up, or are you really that smart and you remembered? So, it represents a person's reasoning ability. The biggest misinterpretation I find is that people think that it refers to knowledge, like somebody's really smart. So the truth is IQ does not refer to a person's knowledge, okay? It refers to their reasoning ability. It is I guess more appropriately, it is their ability to gain knowledge and not necessarily their knowledge of its in and of itself. It's more about their ability to gain knowledge. That's what IQ is about. So this is my own take on it. Ancient IQ, while the knowledge itself has changed drastically over thousands of years, drastically, the IQ has stayed the same. The ability to learn, the reasoning ability has stayed the same. So I would argue, like if you look back in Plato's day, BC, like those people were not any more or less smart than we are today. They dealt with different information, but they really, for lack of better words, are the same as you and me. They are really the same. It wasn't like a different species ago. This is our species. This is us today. It's what we would deal with today, is what they dealt with in their day. And their IQ was would be measured the same way. So I would, I guess, philosophically say that or suggest that Plato and Newton and Galileo and Darwin and all of them had challenges to believe in theism. It wasn't like they had, because of discoveries that have happened to suggest theism isn't real. I would say no. They probably had thought about it deeply, and it would be an injustice to think that if they were alive today, they wouldn't believe in God because of the information we have today. I would just, anyways. So to answer Tiffany's question, I don't know when the switch sort of happened, but I almost feel like atheism is like a trend. And that's probably fighting words to an atheist, but I feel it's a trend. Anyways, so this is my own statement. Historical scientists were not ignorant about theistic arguments, even though the information they had was different than what we have today. You knew his intelligence quotient, Sean. Rylan, you said, I thought IQ was knowledge. What is ancient IQ? Ancient IQ, sorry, that's not different. That's just my own me talking. That's when I say ancient IQ, I'm referring to like we shouldn't separate them from us. I think it's the same. Like IQ is just IQ, whether it was back then or today. The ability to learn could be measured. So is the norm also about on par with then compared to now? The norm in terms of I wouldn't know how to answer that question. And I'm deviating maybe a little too far here because there's a lot of this is not sort of fact or anything. It's me just making observations and philosophical questions of like I just really don't think that they're much different than us today. Sean, you said okay. That's a good way to put it, Sean. IQ should be universal through the ages. That's probably the best way of describing it. Okay, fine tuning. That's what the next chapter is about in this book. So let's talk about fine tuning. All right. there's a few things to know about fine tuning. We're going to go over some statistics that are mind-boggling. And the thing about these statistics is they're not really arguable. In fact, I don't think science argues these at all. I don't it, it's not something that can be debunked. It's just it's pretty much fact. Whether you're a theist or atheist, the fine tuning is a fact. Something for us to recognize is that fine tuning does not refer to design. Just because something is fine tuned doesn't mean there was a designer, although we are going to make a case for that. It doesn't, that's not one and the same. It's not like, oh, because there's fine tuning, there's proof of design. No, we make a case for that, but that's not proof. So there's a myth that, and this is actually in the book, that with enough time and luck, life would evolve. So we're going to go over some really mind-boggling statistics. And for me, whenever I've talked with atheists in the past, I find that a common answer is when you give enough time and chance, this is going to happen. Even though it's infinitesimally small chance of it happening, because you give it enough time of eternity, of billions of years, it eventually will happen. Okay, that's not fact, by the way. That's not science. That's like suggestion, and I would call it a myth. The fact the fact is that any evidence that we have found so far shows that life is highly unlikely, right? Life is highly unlikely. So if we want to like just look at the facts, we need to acknowledge this. Sean, you said they say that, but the probability of the event is zero. Is it zero or like 0.000000001% type thing? Because yeah, maybe they cling on to that one in a quadrillion chance. Okay, let's talk about some of these mind-boggling numbers. So let's give some perspective here, okay? Before we talk about these numbers, because I'm gonna throw out some numbers, and it's gonna be so big that the common person will just not even know how to comprehend it, and they'll just be like, oh, okay, that's big. But it's like, no, you don't understand how big that is. So let's throw out some numbers for some context here. So since the universe began, according to science, since the very beginning of the universe, long before us, before the planets, before anything, all the seconds combined equals 10 to the 17th power. You guys know what that means, right? So imagine 10 with 17 zeros after that. They don't even have a name for this. You have single digits, double, triple, thousands, 10,000, 100,000, million, 10 million, 100 million, billion, and then you got 100 billion, and then trillion, 100 trillion, and then what's after trillion? I don't even know. So they don't have names for these. So they just say 10 to the something at power, and in this case, 10 to the 17th power. In a mathematician's world, a probability of zero. Oh, okay, Sean. So if it's 0.000 and you add another thousand zeros after that, then in mathematics, that's basically zero. Is that why I've heard that mathematicians have more theists than other areas of science? Okay, the seconds in the universe is 10 to the 17th power. The number this I really like this stat. I just find it really interesting. The number of atoms in the universe. Okay? The number of atoms in the universe is 10 to the 80th power. I mean, this is hard to comprehend. 80 zeros after the 10. That's the number of atoms in the universe. Mind blown. I mean, because we've talked about there are hundreds of billions of stars and galaxies and all that. But what about the number of atoms on each one of those stars, on each one of those galaxies, and everything? It's 10 to the 80th. Just it's hard to comprehend. So there's something in science called the weak force, and the weak force is, uh, gosh, I don't know a lot about this, but I guess there's four foundational aspects to existence. One is gravity, another one is strong force, and then weak force, and then I forgot what the fourth one is. But weak force is basically, oh gosh, what was it? It was something that allowed for decay, and without this, there would be no decay, and then aspects of the universe would not be able to exist. And if you took an alteration of the weak force, if you altered the weak force by 10 to the 100th power, and just changed one small minuscule aspect of the weak force formula and just altered it just 10 to the 100th power, then life would not be able to exist. All right? Life would not be able to exist. And this is not theism. This is science. Science says life would not be able to exist if weak force had an alteration of 10 to the 100th power. You're talking about 20% bigger change than the number of atoms in the universe. That's how small the alteration would have to be. Okay, next. Low entropy chant by what was I forgot what low entropy was. But anyways, low entropy is another big aspect. But if for in order for low entropy to have happened by chance, look at this number, okay? Like we're starting to get to the point where we can't even just give to the whatever power. We have to give like 10 to the times something to the 100th power, okay? So in this case, for low entropy to have happened by chance, it would be 10 to the 10 to the 123rd power. And that's not a typo. You guys seeing this? It's like I don't know. I don't know for this to like for somebody to believe this to have happened by chance is like what? If I believed anything else happened by chance that was even a fraction of the scarcity of this, I'd be considered crazy. Okay, so let's talk about these are some of the numbers. Oh, and I have a slide here just to give an idea of what 10 to the 100th power is. That's a lot of zeros, right? That's what 10 to the 100th power looks like. Okay, now let's talk about the fine-tuning argument itself. So this is the philosophical argument, right? So and this has the premises followed by a conclusion. So fine-tuning is due to this is this is one premise. Fine-tuning is due to either necessity. To, hold on, let me back up a little bit. Again, fine-tuning is not in question here. Fine-tuning is, as far as I'm concerned, fact. Okay, it's a matter. It's the thing that is not fact is how things are fine-tuned. So in this case, this philosophical argument, that fine-tuning is due to either necessity, chance, or design. It is due to one of these three things. And if you can find something else that this might be due to, then you can add it to the list. But I think this is pretty solid. This is what it's been for a while. It's one of these three things. And quite, blatantly, fine tuning is not due to necessity or chance. Therefore, it is due to design. All right. Now, obviously, there's going to be objections to this because it's like, well, what do you mean? How could you just come to the conclusion that something's not necessity or chance? You're begging the question because you're basing it on your own belief already. All right. So let's talk about the objection. And the objection here, which I have heard, is basically we encounter just to put us all in the same playing field here. We encounter equally improbable situations on a daily basis. Let me give you an example. The chances that your parents would have met to have, you know, made you. The chances that, somebody from one part of the world met with another person of another part of the world, and to have, their great 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 grandparents to have, you know the all everything set up so that these people meet at this point in time and in this place, and that'd be the same age, or proper age to, and all these, like, the chances of that happening is, and I don't know what the chances are, but I'm sure it's pretty scarce, right? And you're right. That is a scarce chance, but this is where I want to kind of bring in another element to fine tuning argument. Fine tuning, which is an inevitable possibility or an improbable possibility, right? So yes, maybe parents met was highly unlikely, but it was inevitable because the chances that two people would meet is it's going to happen, right? It's inevitable. It will happen. And I think it's important for us to separate that from what is improbable. So I have some examples here. So I already talked about the chances of parents meeting. Another one is chances of stepping somewhere, okay? And this is just so simple. It's like the chances that, me or you, that we would, as I'm walking to work, that I would step at this very position at this point in time, the chances of me doing that was so infinitesimally small that there you go. There's a good example of, like, well, we shouldn't believe in design because, the chances of anything that we do is so small. But the truth is, it's inevitable. Those things are inevitable. I'm gonna step somewhere, and whether it's stepping here or there, the chance was really small. But it's inevitable that wherever I step, it's gonna happen. You guys with me so far? Sean, you said you can say that all things that happen to us or what we do are inevitable, regardless of the chance. Good words, my friend. All right, the chance of winning the lottery. This is where I feel I'm going to give an example. This is from the book that that I think kind of paints it clearly of what is inevitable versus probable, and how these would relate. Talking about the lottery. So the lottery, and I'm gonna read it from the book, but to summarize before I read it is basically it's inevitable that somebody would win from the lottery. So therefore, it would not be right for us to consider a divine action to have taken place if somebody wins the lottery. But what would be more applicable to say that fine tuning in the universe is to say that it is not a fact that somebody has to win the lottery. It's that, there. Well, let me just read it from the book. You enjoying this, Sean? Thank you. And I'm going to read this just straight from the book. So like stay with me because I do think it's good material. But we haven't gotten to the book yet. So just stay with me. Oh man, we're kind of close on time. Can I go a little bit over this time? Maybe 10 minutes over? I hope you guys are okay with that. All right, so lottery illustrations. Sometimes people will appeal to the example of a lottery in order to justify a chance of the chance alternative. In a lottery, where all the tickets are sold, it is fantastically improbable that any one person should win, yet somebody has to win. It would be unjustified for the winner, whoever it may be, to say the odds against me winning are 20 million to 1, and yet I won. The lottery must have been rigged. In the same way, they say some universe out in the range of possible universes has to exist. The winner of the universe the winner of the universe lottery would also be unjustified to think that because his universe exists, this must have been the result of a design, not chance. All the universes are equally improbable, but one of them, by chance, has to win. So this is actually this idea is actually a misunderstanding of the argument of design. And to offer a more, this is where I want us to listen, to offer a more accurate analogy in its place, listen to this. Contrary to popular impression, the argument for design is not trying to explain why this particular universe exists. Rather, it is trying to explain why a life permitting universe exists. The lottery analogy was misconceived because it is focused on why a particular person won. The correct analogy would be like this: a lottery in which billions and billions and billions of white ping pong balls were mixed together with just one black ping pong ball. So get this in, this imagery in your mind. Billions and billions and billions of white ping pong balls were mixed together with just one black ping pong ball, and you were told that one ball would be randomly selected out of the horde. If it's black, you'll be allowed to live. If it's white, you'll be shot. I know that sounds bad, but it's an accurate analogy. Now, notice that any particular ball that is randomly selected is equally improbable, right? It's equally improbable to select any one ball out there, just like it's equally improbable for me to step anywhere or for your parents to meet. But no matter which ball rolls down the chute, the odds against that particular ball are fantastically improbable. But some ball must roll down the chute. This is the point illustrated by the first lottery analogy. Um, the crucial point The crucial point is that whichever ball rolls down the chute, it is overwhelmingly more probable that it will be white rather than black. You guys getting this? Getting the black ball is no more improbable than getting any particular white ball, but is incomprehensibly more probable that you will get a white ball instead of a black one. So if the black one rolls down the chute, you certainly should suspect that the lottery was rigged to let you live. You guys got that? Yeah, you're right, Sean. It's inevitable that some ball will roll down. So, so it's important for us to know what is inevitable versus what is improbable. If and and the fine tuning of the universe is not inevitable at all. It's actually improbable. Chaos does not come from order. You guys have probably heard of that. And the explosions that science says from the Big Bang somehow caused order is very improbable. All right, let's let me just see here. It's 9 o'clock right now. There's another aspect here that I want to read through, and then we'll be done. So there's also an objection of like, is an explanation needed? Some people have argued that no explanation is needed for why we observe a life-permitting universe, but that it's the only kind that we can observe. If the universe were not life-permitting, then we wouldn't be able to ask about this. So this reasoning is fallacious. The fact that we can observe only a life permitting universe does nothing to eliminate the need of an explanation of why it exists. So it's kind of like, just because this happened, why do we feel we need to explain that it happened? And I think it's very important. The explanation is very important. Tiffany said, why do they still argue that it is probable just based on fine tuning alone? That the universe is probable? I'm not sure who would argue that actually. Anybody I've talked to has been like, it's so crazy to think that this all happened by chance. Aren't we so lucky? So so an explanation needed, and I do want to close on this because I think this sort of encompasses and closes it all out, because just because we know that it's inevitable, or sorry, we know that it's improbable, so why do we want to throw God into the mix? And this is why. Because here's an illustration of why we theists jump to God and want to talk about God for the answers to all this. And here's an illustration. Imagine you're traveling abroad and arrested on a on a trumped up drug charge. You're dragged in front of a firing squad of 100 trained marksmen standing at point blank range. You hear the command given, ready, aim, fire. You hear the deafening sound of the guns, and then you observe that you're still alive. That all of the 100 marksmen who are only 5 feet away missed. Now, what would you conclude? Would you say, well, I guess I shouldn't be surprised that they all missed. After all, if they hadn't all missed, I wouldn't be here to be surprised about it. Nothing more to be explained here. Of course not. It's true that you shouldn't be surprised that you don't observe that you're dead, since if you were dead, you wouldn't be able to observe it. But you should still be surprised that you do observe that you're alive, in light of the enormous improbability that all of the marksmen would miss. And this is the big point here. Indeed, you would probably conclude that they all missed on purpose, that the whole thing was set up, engineered for some reason by someone. So it is very important to understand the fine tuning, the 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 infinitesimally small chance of us living, the improbable, not inevitable chance of us living, the improbable chance of us living, and then to explain why we're living. It is very foundational to us as human beings, I believe. Okay, Tiffany, you said scientists talking about the universe say that it is probable. Man, I would need to get caught up on that. I don't, I would imagine that their arguments are based on the inevitability of it and not talking about what is probable or not probable, but just the inevitability of saying like with enough time and enough chance it's going to happen. Rylan, how did they miss? Well, that's the point. We don't know. You would imagine that it was rigged if 100 trained marksmen missed you from point blank range. Oh, Sean, I didn't see your comment. You would conclude that it was improbable to happen by chance. They will miss. So it is. So it had to have had a reason or be engineered that way. Yes, exactly. And actually, going back to the lottery example, grabbing the one ball. If you had those billions and billions of white balls and one black ball, and the black ball rolled down to shoot, it would be reasonable to say this must have been rigged. This must have been designed for the black one to fall down the chute because there's no way that that happens, right? It would be logical to think that. But the chance of the universe happening would be equivalent to those billions of white balls and one black ball, having the black ball roll down like 10 times in a row, right? That's what it would be equivalent to. So imagine that. If that happened, anybody that happened to would believe. I will go out on a limb and say this. If that happened to you, you would believe that that lottery was rigged. It was designed. But yet, why can't we believe that the universe was designed? So there you go. I think that's a good point to end on. That's a good closing statement there. Yep, just yeah, Sean, like you were saying, it's very a similar analogy to the fine-tuning universe. Everything improbable by chance. Yes, exactly. All right, cool guys. Well, I'm gonna leave it at that. We just covered everything I wanted to cover. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll catch you guys next time. Catch you guys later.